Welcome, flip clock fans. You're looking at a non-working Yoshitoma Nara walk-on flip clock. The clock is kind of discolored with age. It is an older version because it's got white print there. So we're going to look and figure out why this clock is not working and see if we can fix it. And also I want to look a little bit at this mechanism. I want to revisit this mechanism. I had a bad attitude about it at first, but I'm starting to think it's not all that bad after all. He's got one lever that controls the minutes, and the other lever controls the hours. So getting this off, the components just start to fall apart, as you see. That used to scare me, because it looks complicated, but it's actually not as complicated as it looks. So we'll go into that, especially in the end. I'll show you how to get this back together a little easier than what I used to try to do. The clocks new go for high dollar. These are $300 plus clocks for some reason. The clock is a TWEMCO QT30. And a lot of these TWEMCOs are used for this kind of purpose, for branding and stuff like that. So you can see here, this is the heart and soul of the clock. You've got the one side that controls the hours and the other side that controls the minutes. And this is where the levers just feel kind of wonky. They can come loose like that, you see. The way it goes together is actually pretty ingenious for a flip clock. This cam here is going on the minutes is going to control when the hours actually drop. You can see that it will mate into here. The curious thing is you don't have to try to match the minutes with the hour dropping. So because of the design, you just have to get it all together and it's going to work. See here on the hours, that cam will cause this lever to draw back and then release, which advances the hours, with the minutes being advanced by the clock. These little things here just control position of the wheel. They're on both sides. So here's the motor. I'm a little leery of getting it out because I don't want to break that plastic. It is a basic quartz clock mechanism, so you could run a clock with hands off of this. Kind of strange. Now, I had to try to figure out what's going on here, so I'm looking it over. So here's a closer look. Remove the back here, you can see more of the gears. And you've got a coil that causes this to rotate. And goes up the gear chain. And then it comes through on the other side. We'll talk a little bit about those gears in a second. So the shaft here is called a Euro shaft. Now to get that off, you have to actually lift the circuit board up a little bit. And then taking a look, you can see that this Euro shaft has flat spots on either side. Now this would be used to advance the hour hand if you were using a regular clock. It serves no real purpose. It does help support the minutes though. Now if you look at this gear here, when you have any clock, typically you have to have a way to set the clock, because when all the gears are in line, you're either going to strip gears or you're not going to be able to move the clock unless you have one of these or something that functions like this. This gear is functioning as a slip clutch. So when you advance the time manually, the force will overcome the friction that's holding that gear and allow the clock to be set. Because when you have the gears in the gear chain here like this, the way it gears down like that, you wouldn't normally be able to move the hands. So that's interesting because it comes into play here in a second. Is when I found out what was wrong. So this is the Euro shaft end, and you can see that I've got it off the post. Now that matches the minutes down in there. You can see it's got the same shape. But the thing is, why did that come off? And the reason is, if you look, you'll see a crack in this post here. So what was happening was that little brass piece, it was turning, so it was acting as a slip clutch. Now this is after I've glued it in place. I just used super glue and it's tight. Now this is before the whitening of the clock. It is a beige clock, but this is before I did that. What I'm showing is a good way to reassemble this clock. So here's our motor side back together, ready to go. So what you got to do is look at this and say, well, this is where the hours go. We'll put the hours in on this side, the minutes on the left. We just have to make sure we get the little spring-loaded claws there pulled back once we start loading the wheels up. And you'll see me do that here in a second. Okay, so to get this clock back together, you want to start with the hours first. It's just easier. You can actually get them all in place. It's pretty straightforward. What we got to do is put it on this side. And we've just got to get the claws out of the way. So we just raise those back and let the wheel seat. You'll feel it seat. When I get it ready to put into the clock, I've got to get a flat spot. In other words, get the tiles to where they want to lie, to where one number is showing, and just put it in place. Now it's probably going to be easier to keep the tiles flat if I do it oriented up like this. It is a little awkward. So once you've got that in place, it should already work. So you can test and make sure. It works fine. So to get the minutes in place, you have to take care about how you place the minutes into the motor. Guess we better get the operation indicator in place. So you got that Euro shaft. Now you could move that, but the best way to get it in place is to put this on here and start to turn. It'll drop into place when you're in the right spot. There, so it's dropped into place. And then you're going to flatten it out. It's a matter of just inserting it into the cam into that spot, getting your claws out of the way. And sometimes you have to pull this lever back to allow it to seat. It's a little awkward, especially when you're trying to show it on camera, but it's not as hard as it looks. You just kind of work it in there. Nothing should be forced. We'll move the claw back. There's one on the front, but it doesn't have a spring, and so it's kind of gravity driven. And then I have to move the minutes arm out of the way sometimes. Press it in. There's screws that'll go into those spots there, but it's held pretty tight right now. So it should work right away. We'll move the levers to see everything's in place. It's working. So we'll see if it advances. And it does. So the minutes and the hours are in line, no problem. Again, it's a pretty good design in my opinion. So what's next? Well, we're going to try to whiten this up a little bit. So here we are whitening. We got a light and we're using hydrogen peroxide. Now this is at one point where I separated the two halves, and you can see it was a two-tone clock for a little while. But eventually we got things back in line. Everything looks pretty good. Nice looking clock, and it is functional. There we go. The TWEMCO Yoshitoma Nara walk-on flip clock. Thanks for taking the time.